L'kutei Sichos, Chelek Tesvav, Toldos Hey, Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef Ben Yamin Ben Rabbi Nasha Kaltman. This is actually a very fascinating Rashi Sicha, where, as the Rebbe does, the Rebbe focuses on a point that Rashi is trying to bring and revolutionizes the entire understanding of Rashi and actually of the Psukim. It happens to be that it's a little bit technical, and so it is highly recommended to open up a Chumash and look into the Psukim to be able to follow the back and the forth of the structure and the order of the Psukim, which is what Rashi is trying to teach us. So before we start the Sicha, I'm going to read from the Chumash. This is the end of Parshas Toldos, the part where the Torah discusses Esav emulating the instructions that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov, and he too does not marry the women of Canaan. He marries the daughter of Yishmael. Pasuk Hey, Vayishlach Yitzchak es Yaakov v'yilech Padan Aram. Yitzchak sends Yaakov, and Yaakov goes to Padan Aram, and Lavan ben Besuel Aram Yachi Rivka em Yaakov Esav, to Lavan was Rivka's brother. Pasuk Vav, Vayar Esav kibeirach Yitzchak es Yaakov. Esav saw that Yitzchak sent Yaakov. Yitzchak benched Yaakov. V'shilach oisoi Padan Aram, and sent him to Padan Aram. Lo kachas lo misham isha bevarchoi oisoi, to take a woman, a wife, from there after or when he blessed him. Vayitzavo of Lamer, and he commanded to Yaakov, Lesikach ishim b'nais Canaan, do not take a woman from the Canaan women. Pasuk Zayin, Vayishma Yaakov el Aviv Elima, Yaakov listened to his father and mother. Vayelech Padana Aram, and went to Padan Aram. Pasuk Ches, Vayar Esav Kirois b'nais Canaan v'ni Yitzchak Aviv. So Esav sees that the women from Canaan are bad in the eyes of his father Yitzchak. Pasuk Tes, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael, so Esav goes to Yishmael, Vayikach es Mochalas pas Yishmael, and then marries Mochalas, the daughter of Yishmael. So just before we even start the Sicha, I'll point some things out just to give you a heads up. But first of all, you're going to notice that it says Vayar Esav twice. Vayar Esav kibeirach Yitzchak in Pasuk Vav, and Vayar Esav kirois b'nois Canaan in Pasuk Ches. You will also notice Vayishma Yaakov, that the Pasuk says that Yaakov listened. In the middle of the discussion about Esav, it starts talking about Yaakov. So this is the Rashi that we're going to focus on. What does it mean Vayishma Yaakov? Why does it bring up the fact that Yaakov listened in the middle of the discussion about Esav? So let's begin from the beginning of the Sicha. In Pasuk Vayishma Yaakov v'gemer vayelech Padan Aram. On the Pasuk, Vayishma Yaakov, Yaakov listened to his father and to his mother and went to Padan Aram, is Rashi Mefarish Avdi Verter Vayishma Yaakov. So Rashi explains on the words Yaakov heard, Yaakov listened, Mechubar le'inyan shalmayla, that this is actually connected to what was said previously. And Rashi explains, Vayar Esav kibeirach Yitzchak. Esav saw that Yitzchak blessed Yaakov, V'chishilach oisei Padan Aram, and that he sent Yaakov to Padan Aram. V'chishama Yaakov al Aviv v'halach Padan Aram, and he saw that Yaakov listened to his father and actually went to Padan Aram. V'chirois b'nois Canaan, and he saw that the women of Canaan are not good in his father's eyes, and therefore v'halach gamhu el Yishmael. So he too, Esav too, goes to Yishmael. Learn dik in Pashtus. So learning this on a basic level, Rashi is addressing the following. We can say, we cannot explain that when the pasuk says Vayishma Yaakov, that Yaakov listened, that the Torah is telling us the events as they occurred. As Yaakov Avinu had gefolgt sein Vater und gegangen in Padan Aram, the Yaakov actually listened and followed his father's instructions and went to Padan Aram. But das ist schon erzählt geworden früher in der Parsha, because this was already told to us in this Parsha in Pasuk Hey. Vayishlach Yitzchak es Yaakov vayelech, that Yitzchak sent Yaakov and Yaakov went. Und die Psukim, that's number one. Number one, we were already told that Yaakov listened and went to Padan Aram. Number two, und die Psukim stehen far und noch Vayishma Yaakov, Pasuk Vav, and Pasuk Ches and Tes, which are before and after Pasuk Zayin, that says Vayishma Yaakov, that Yaakov listened, Reden Gor wegen Esav, are all about Esav. Both the Pasuk before and the Psukim after are talking about Esav. The Rebbe is Rashi Masbir, therefore Rashi explains, as Vayishma Yaakov kum behemshich zu Vayar Esav, that Vayishma Yaakov is not the Torah telling us what Yaakov did, but the Torah is telling us what Esav saw. Der Pasuk rechend uis noch a prat, was Esav hat gesehen. The Pasuk is telling us another detail that Esav saw. Esav saw that Yitzchak benched Yaakov. Esav saw that Yaakov was sent to Padan Aram. Esav also saw that Yaakov listened to his parents and he went to Padan Aram. And Esav saw that Yitzchak does not like the women of Canaan, and so Esav went to Yishmael. So that's what Rashi is telling us. Rashi is explaining to us that Vayishma Yaakov is part of the things that Esav saw that led him ultimately to go and find a wife from the daughters of Yishmael. However, we have to understand a few things. Aleph, number one. This detail, that Vayishma Yaakov is connected to Vayar Esav, that it's one of the things that Esav saw, it would have sufficed had Rashi just said it very concisely. Yaakov, Vayishma Yaakov, this is connected to the thing that was said earlier that Esav saw. Why does Rashi have to itemize all of the things that Esav saw, which are already written in the pasuk? The pasuk tells us all the things that Esav saw. So I have to know, Rashi's explaining to us, Vayishma Yaakov is one of those things that Esav saw, because it doesn't say, V'Esav ra sheva shashama Yaakov. So Rashi has to explain that to us. Even though the Rebbe in the Ha'ara brings that even that technically should be self-understood. But let's say it's not self-understood. But all the other things that Esav saw are in the pasuk. So why does Rashi have to elaborate on all the other things that Esav saw? Question one. Base question two. In pasuk wird erzählt noch a Sach was Esav hat gesehen. There's another detail that the pasuk tells us that Esav did see. Vayitzav olav leimer leisikach isha b'bnais Canaan. That Esav saw that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from Canaan. Out of all of the details that Rashi does list in his Rashi that Esav saw, things that are said in the pasuk, this one, the fact that Esav saw that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov not to marry a woman from Bnei Canaan, this Rashi does not mention. Why? Gimel. When Rashi tells us the various details that were already mentioned above, that Vayishma Yaakov is a continuation to, so seemingly it would make sense to list all those things that were mentioned before Vayishma Yaakov. Vayishma Yaakov is coming as a continuation to the previous things, 1, 2, and 3. But you don't have to retell me the detail of Vayishma Yaakov. You're coming to tell me that Vayishma Yaakov is a continuation of before. So why do you have to repeat the fact that Yaakov heard? And certainly the things that are said in the pasuk after Vayishma Yaakov are not relevant in this Rashi, seemingly. Because the whole point of Rashi is to tell me that Vayishma Yaakov is a continuation to before. So why does Rashi have to bring up the details that are mentioned in the pasuk after Vayishma Yaakov? Daled Nachmer Pella is an even greater of a question. But Rashi is Messiah v'Halakam Yishmael. That Rashi concludes with the fact that Esav went to Yishmael. Which is not even the things from the things that Esav saw. It's the practical outcome of what Esav saw. When he saw all these things, and he saw that Yitzchak, his father, was not happy with the women of Canaan, so he goes to Yishmael. That's the practical action that he takes. If Rashi is here to tell me the things that he saw, why does he have to conclude with the halach al Yishmael that he went to Yishmael? And you can't answer that Rashi is telling us that all these things that he saw led to him going to Yishmael under Riber, and this would answer question Daled. Why it says V'alachamol Yishmael? This would also answer question Aleph. why it mentions all the details, and question Gimel, why it says the other details that happened after Vayishma Yaakov. When the Rebbe rechentus Rashi al pratim, and this would also explain why Rashi mentions all the details of Chashtein and Pasuk, which are mentioned in the Pasuk. Eich v'chishama, the Yaakov that he saw what Yaakov. He saw that Yaakov listened. V'halach v'chulu, and that Yaakov went to Padan Aram. V'chirois, and he saw that Yitzchak doesn't like the women from Canaan. And then for v'halach v'chulu, and therefore he saw all these things. Therefore he went to Yishmael. You can't answer that. V'al dead inyan as v'yar Esav v'hakdamu and disiba from v'yelech Esav v'geimer is Hashandik v'zechalein. This idea that that Esav saw, and therefore he went to Yishmael, that's self-understood. Even if Rashi didn't explain that Vayishma Yaakov is connected to what was written above, we would still know that all the other details are leading up to the fact that Esav went to Yishmael. In other words, if Rashi hadn't explained Vayishma Yaakov, so we wouldn't know what it means. But we would still know all the other ones that Esav saw, and Esav went to Yishmael. So Rashi said also answer Vayishma Yaakov. But generally speaking, we understand the order of the events. Esav saw something and therefore went to Yishmael. So why does Rashi have to say V'halach kamu Yishmael? This is self-understood. From the fact that Rashi, in his explanation, while explaining that Vayishma Yaakov is connected to what was written above, he includes the fact that Esav went to Yishmael. Is verstandig, from this is understood, das kommt in Verbindung mit dem Pirus, that it's connected. Once you tell me that Vayishma Yaakov is connected to above, and then all the other details that Rashi mentions, it becomes understood what it means that he went to Yishmael. And the Riber is Rashi Messiah, which is why he ends off with V'halach kamu Yishmael. In other words, this is actually part of understanding what Rashi is telling us, and only after you understand what Rashi is saying, by Yishma Yaakov, will you understand what Rashi is telling us that Esav went to Yishmael. So, number one, why are all the details mentioned in Rashi? Number two, why does Rashi omit the detail that Esav saw, that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from Bnei Canaan? Why does Rashi continue to tell us that V'chishama, that Yaakov listened, that Esav saw that Yaakov listened, and certainly the details that are written after V'yishma Yaakov, why are they relevant, and why does it? What is the connection? What is the uftu? What is the addition of the fact that Esav actually went to Yishmael? Why does Rashi include that as well? So then we're going to go back now into the psukim, and that was going to introduce another understanding in the psukim themselves, and then we're going to get back to Rashi. And here we're going to focus on the two vayars. Then in Pasuk Vav, it says Vayar Esav ki beirach Yitzchak, and then in Pasuk Ches, it says Vayar Esav ki rois b'nei Canaan. We'll understand all of this by first introducing the following idea. Since after the Pasuk tells us that Esav saw that Yitzchak benched Yaakov, and that Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram, and that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from Canaan, Chazet Iber der Pasuk Nachama Vayar Esav. The Pasuk now repeats again the words Vayar Esav. Esav saw Kirois b'nei Canaan ben Yitzchak Aviv, that the women of Canaan are not liked in the eyes of his father Yitzchak. Vayelech, and Esav goes to Yishmael. So it says Vayar Esav twice. He's verstandig from them. From this it's understood as die Sachen, was Esav hat gesehen, the things that Esav saw, Bashstein von zwei Sugim, consist of two separate types of seeing. Was bei jedem Sug ist gewesen ein anderer Öfen von Vayar. Each category, each type of seeing was a different type, with a different level. Und der Rebbe steht Vayar Esav zweimal, which is why it has to say Vayar Esav two times. Und der Chilek zwischen die zwei Vayar is, and what will be the difference between the two seeings? This will be similar to what was written earlier by Rashi in the beginning of Parshas Vayera, which, as we know, by the Rebbe always teaches us that when Rashi already says something earlier, he does not have to say it again later on. So Rashi is already expecting us. Rashi is already expecting us to know this idea of two vayars from the beginning of Vayera, Parshas Vayera, and we're going to apply that to these two vayars. What does it say over there? Ma'u vayar or Vayera vayar shnei pa'amim. Over there it says Vayera elav Hashem be'Elonei Mamre. The parsha begins that Hashem appeared to Avraham in Elonei Mamre, and the second pasuk of the parsha says Vayisa eino vayar. He lifted his eyes and he saw. So it says Vayera, and Vayar it says two times. So Rashi says Ma'u vayar shnei pa'amim. Why does it say twice? Avraham saw. Harishon kimashmoi. The first means literally he saw something. He observed. The hasheni lashon havana. The second one means that he understood what he was seeing. Nistakel chulu. Avraham saw the three of them standing over there, the three malachim. Behaved, and he understood that they didn't want to burden him because he was in pain, and therefore he goes and he brings them. So the second vayar is to say that he processed what he saw, and he understood something that had to be done. So the same thing we could apply to us. The first one means that he saw literally. He observed the events that were taking place among the other people, between his father Yitzchak and his brother Yaakov. Now he observed that that Yitzchak benched Yaakov, blessed Yaakov, and that Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram, and he commanded Yaakov. All these things are about Yaakov. He saw what happened between Yitzchak and Yaakov, almost as if to say that it's not something that affected him. That's where the words Yaakov, Oisei, and Olav are underscored. Because this was something that he was observing that was going on between two other people that seemingly did not affect him at all. Whereas the second Vayera is Lashon Havana, is now a term of understanding. He was convinced of something. Nistakel chulu vehaven, as we said in the other Rashi, he saw and he understood. Now he understood that in general, it wasn't just something that Yitzchak was saying to Yaakov, but that Yitzchak did not like the women of Canaan. Was der Vayar is an inyan was is imne geya und im mechayev zu. This vayar is something that is relevant to him and does obligate him in something. And as the psukim continue, as der vayar hatin bavig to gain so Yishmael, that this vayar, this seeing, the second one, where he realized, he understood that Yitzchak doesn't want his children to marry the women of Canaan, this caused him, this affected him, that he should actually go to Yishmael and marry Yishmael's daughter. So this is step number one. The fact that it says vayar two times is telling us that there are certain things that Esav saw, then there are things that Esav understood, and those things that he understood, or that thing that he understood, led him to take action. Based on this, we have a question. The Tachlitz von dem ganzen Sipur von Vayar Esav ist doch zu erklären, die Sipur, was er führt zu Vayelech Esav und Yishmael, the purpose of this whole story is to explain why Esav went to Yishmael to marry Yishmael's daughter. Und auf dem Wort gewinnt genug der Prat von zweiten Vayar. So according to this, the second Vayar would have been enough. Vayar Esav kirois b'neis Knan b'nei Yitzchak aviv. When Esav realized, understood, as we said before, that his father Yitzchak does not like the women of Canaan. So therefore he went to marry from Esav. So the Vast erzählt die Teire die ganze Arichis, was Esav hat gesehen beim ersten Vayar. Why does the Torah have to elaborate about all of the other things that Esav saw? Is if, as we explained, they didn't affect anything. He was observing something that was happening between two other people. The fact that he went to Yishmael is because he understood the second Vayar. So why does the Pasuk have to tell us the whole first Vayar? That is the question that, as we will see, ultimately is bothering Rashi. So let's continue the question. At the most, if you want to tell us that Esav saw something, the most important detail would have been that Esav saw that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov not to marry a woman from Canaan. Was von dem hat Vayar, which led to his understanding, verstanden, as Canaan und der Riber Vayelech Esav, which led him to understand that the women of Canaan are not good, and therefore he went to Yishmael. Und dafke dem prat is Rashi mashmet Canaan, and it is this detail that Rashi omits out of all the other details. In other words, if you did have to tell me there was a Vayar before the second Vayar, what would be the most important detail? That he saw his father tell Yaakov, you're not allowed to, don't marry a woman from Canaan. What happens in the end? That's the one detail that Rashi actually omits. They're beer in them. In Siv Gimel, the Rabbi is going to explain the answer to this. The Rabbi is going to say that there is another question that has not yet been addressed. And the question is going to be, why did Yishmael, who's trying to emulate what Yitzchak told Yaakov, why does Esav not go to Padan Aram? If Esav wants to do whatever Yitzchak tells Yaakov, then why doesn't Esav follow entirely and actually go to Padan Aram? And once we understand the reason for that, we'll understand why the pasuk has to tell us the two vayars, and we'll understand why Rashi elaborates as he does. But let's take one step at a time. Their beard in them, the beard is as follows. The explanation. The fact that the Torah tells us this entire elaborate version of the story is to is to answer a question that we have on the fact that Esav went to Yishmael. Das was Esav was gegangen, nehmen Yishmael's Tochter. The fact that Esav went to take Yishmael's daughter, to marry Yishmael's daughter, and did not marry any of the women of Canaan which were next door, which were nearby, is gewöhnlich zu weisen, als steht nicht ab von Jaakovin und euch ist mekayem dem Ratzon von Yitzchakin. Because he wanted to show that he is no less important, no less worthy than Yaakov, and he too fulfills the will of his father Yitzchak. Isn't it moving? But if that's the case, it's not understood. Yitzchak had doch angesagt, Yaakov nicht nur lässig Echisha b'nei Canaan. Yitzchak did not only tell Yaakov not to marry from Canaan, he also sent him to Padan Aram to marry a woman from there. When Yaakov and Mekayim were inside and tzad shlili, inside and tzad chiyuvi, Yaakov did both the negative and the positive. Yaakov did not marry a woman from Canaan. And he did fulfill the positive commandment, which is to go to Padan Aram. Why does Esav only do one of the two? Esav only fulfills the not marrying a woman from Canaan. It is aber nicht gegangen ke Padan Aram, but he did not go to Padan Aram in order to marry someone from there. So if he's trying to emulate what Yaakov is doing, and he's trying to say, I'm just as good, and I'm going to follow Yitzchak's instructions. So why does Esav not do it all the way and go to Padan Aram? To answer this question in Esav's conduct, so Torah tells us that there were two vayars, there was two seeings that Esav saw. As in die Sache, was Esav hat gesehen, that there was two categories. Was jeder kommt masbez aneinander praten, and each of the two categories explain another element in the fact, another detail in the fact that Esav went to Yishmael. The erste vayar is masbir for was Esav hat angenommen, as darf nicht gehen kein Padan Aram. The first vayar explains why Esav understood, why Esav thought that he does not have to go to Padan Aram. The zweite vayar, for was Esav is gegangen nehmen an Isha von Yishmael. The second vayar tells us why Esav did go to Yishmael. So we already have a new approach here. The Torah tells us Esav saw this, Esav saw a bunch of things. We asked, we wondered, why do we have to have both vayars? Just tell us that Esav realized that Yitzchak does not like the daughters of Canaan, and that's it. So the Rebbe tells us that there's more going on over here. It's not just that Esav went to Yishmael. Esav didn't go to Padan Aram, which is something that Yaakov did do because his father told him to. So the Rebbe explains the first vayar is telling us why Esav did not go to Yishmael, to Padan Aram. And the second vayar is why he did go to Yishmael. The Habir. And in Siv Daled, the Rebbe is going to explain this. What in the first vayar, as we see it in the pasuk, explains to us why Esav doesn't go to Padan Aram. The Rebbe is going to show it to us. The shlichus was Yitzchak geschickt Yaakov ke Padan Aram lakachas le misham isha. The mission that Yitzchak sent Yaakov to go to Padan Aram to marry a woman over there is late Esav's menuk, according to Esav's perspective, it's not because Yitzchak felt or held that only there can you find the proper shidduch, the proper wife. Nor amitul unakli zu bakumen die brachas mit welcher Yitzchak hat ihm gebencht. To go to Padan Aram was a method and a vessel with which to receive the brachas that Yitzchak gave Yaakov. When the pasuk is danacham madgish, as the pasuk emphasizes, Vayar Esav kiberach, Esav saw that Yitzchak benched Yaakov, v'shilach oisei padena Aram bevorchoi oisei, and he sent him to Padan Aram as part of his blessings. Und der Riber hat gehalten, and therefore Esav understood, as the inyan from Vayishma Yaakov vayelach Padena Aram is the Gebleis Yankiven. The idea that Yaakov went to Padan Aram is only relevant to Yaakov. Und zu ihm Esav hat nicht kein Sheiches, but to him, to Esav, it has no practical application because he didn't get the brachas. Und der Vater ist nicht gegangen in Padan Aram, and therefore he doesn't go to Padan Aram. In other words, the first Vayar is saying that the whole reason that, as far as Esav was concerned, that Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram was part of the brachas. Therefore, says Esav, since I did not receive the brachas, I do not have to go to Padan Aram. Dakegin, whereas Yitzchak Sivoy Lesikach Ishav Nois Knan, his commandment to not marry a woman from Canaan, is in them. Vayar, Haven, Esav. Esav saw and understood, as we explained earlier, the second Vayar means to understand. It's because Yitzchak did not like the women of Canaan. This is applicable even to Esav. And therefore Esav went to Yishmael. So this is the Rebbe's explanation of these psukim. That a person's going to wonder, why did Esav not go to Padan Aram? The answer is, because Esav thought that the Padan Aram was connected to the brachas. Vayar Esav kibeidach Yitzchak, v'shilach Esav Padan Aram, lokachas le'misham isha bevorchoi oisei, it's all about the brachas. Therefore, it's not applicable to Esav. Therefore, he didn't go to Padan Aram. But the fact that Yitzchak does not like B'nais Canaan, this is something that Esav understood is applicable to everyone, including him, and therefore he didn't go there. Instead, he goes to Yishmael. Now we can go back to the Rashi. Leidem Alam is moving the Arichas and Pirish Rashi, and according to this, we'll understand the long-windedness of Rashi and why Rashi mentions all these details as he does. The first thing Rashi tells us is that Vayishma Yaakov is not a side statement that's telling us what actually happened, but rather it's telling us what Esav saw. It's connected to above. Kommt Rashi bavornen, was beim ersten Vayar Esav, far die Werte Vayishma Yaakov v'goymar, steht Vayitzav alav leimer loy sikach ishav b'nois Knan. For this, you might want to look inside, or you could just trust me on this. But Pasuk Vav says like this: Esav saw that Yitzchak benched Yaakov. Esav saw that Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram. Esav saw that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from B'nai Canaan. Then it says in Pasuk Zayin, Vayishma Yaakov. And then in Pasuk Ches comes Vayar Esav, the second Vayar. The question is going to be the fact that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from B'nai Canaan is the second detail. We just explained that there's two things happening here. Number one, Esav is seeing that Yaakov is being sent to Padan Aram to get the brachas in his understanding, and number two, that Yitzchak does not like B'nai Canaan. So Vayitzav olav leimer le'sikach isha b'B'nai Canaan belongs to the second Vayar. So the question is, why is it in this pasuk? Why is it mentioned here and not later? According to this explanation, that the first Vayar Esav was explaining why Esav did not go to Padan Aram. Because he felt that these details were not relevant to him. This would mean that when Esav saw that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from Canaan, belongs to the second Vayar, which explains why Esav did not marry a Canaanite woman. So So now, once Rashi says that Vayishma Yaakov Mechuber Le'inyan Shel Maila, that it's part of the first thing, of the Vayar Esav, the first Vayar, that Yaakov went to Padan Aram to receive his brachas in Esav's perspective. So why is Vayitzav Olav in that same pasuk? The Rebbe is Rashi Mefaris of Vayishma Yaakov Mechuber Le'inyan Shel Maila. The Rashi has to explain Taka, the Vayishma Yaakov belongs to earlier. When Taistus the Proton Svelches is Mechuber and explains to which details it's connected, Kibeidach Yitzchak to the bracha, V'cheshilach Oise Padan Aram, and he sent it to Padan Aram. Und springt der Rebbe und is mash mit dem Prat von Vayitzav Le'sikach, and he skips the detail that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov to not marry a woman from Bnei Canaan, because that is Taka belongs to later. The Rebbe is Madgish with this Rashi highlights as the Vayitzav is in Esav's Re'iyah nidnei kietz Vayishma Yaakov Vayelech Padan Aram, that in Esav's perspective, the Vayitzav, the commandment from Yitzchak to Yaakov to not marry a woman from Canaan, does not belong to the first Vayar. It's not a part of the first Vayar. Nor Shayach zum zweiten Vayar Esav. Kirois b'neis Knan was the far of Halach Kamol Yishmael. It belongs to the second Vayar. So we're answering 1.5 questions over here. First of all, we're answering B'chlal why Rashi begins what we're answering over here is the question what Rashi is coming to teach us. What is Rashi telling us? Mechuber Le'inyan Shel Maila. Why is it necessary? And it's coming to answer why Rashi skips the detail, which was our question base of Vayitzav Olav Le'sikach Isha Mibnei Canaan. So that is explaining very simple. When you're looking at the psukim and you're understanding that there's 2 vayars. One vayar is telling me why Esav does not go to Padan Aram, because he feels that it's not relevant to him. The second vayar is why he goes to Yishmael. But the Vayitzav of Lamer Le'sikach Isha B'nei Canaan is in the wrong place, seemingly, at least in Esav's perspective. So therefore, Rashi has to explain Vayishma Yaakov belongs to to the first Vayar Esav. That Esav saw that Yaakov listened to his father and his mother and went to Padan Aram, and Rashi omits the words Vayitzav of Lamer because at this point they're not yet relevant. It's not Vayishma Yaakov belongs to the earlier Vayar. And the Yitzav of Lamer belongs to the later Vayar. Later in the Sikha, we'll touch upon why it's Taka out of order. And we're going to say that it's not really out of order. But the way we're telling the story, as Esav is observing what's going on, the Yitzav of Lamer is in the wrong place. And therefore Rashi has to clarify that Vayishma Yaakov belongs to the first Vayar. And Rashi omits the words that Esav saw the Yitzav of Lamer Le'sikach Isha B'nei Canaan, because that's not relevant yet. That's only going to be relevant to the second Vayar. Sivav. The meat is moving the Diak Lashon Rashi. With Sivav, we're going to answer a question that was not yet mentioned in the beginning of the Sikha. It was referenced. It'll answer some questions from earlier, but it doesn't. This question is not said specifically. The midas movement the Diak Lashon Rashi was bringt dem Prat von Chirois B'nei Canaan erst noch v'holach Padana Aram. If the pasuk says Vayitzav Olav Lamer Le'sikach Isha B'nei Canaan, and later it says Vayishma Yaakov El Aviv Elima V'yelech Padana Aram, why in Rashi is the order the opposite? Why in Rashi does he mention first the fact that halach Padana Aram and then B'chirois B'nei Canaan? So, but now it's understood. Das was Vayitzav Geimer steht bekasav im ersten Vayar Esav is der Far weil bepoil und ist es vorgekommen Far Vayelech Padana Aram. Und weil auf Yaakov hat das gepoilt, das Vayishma Geimer Vayelech Padana Aram. Let's pause for a second. Why Taka is it done? Is it said like this? Why Taka does it say Vayitzav Olav Lamer before Vayishma Yaakov and before Vayar Esav, if we just explain that it's the wrong order? The answer is because in real life, that's how it happened. In real life, what actually happened was that Yitzchak commanded Yaakov, don't go to the women of Canaan, and Yaakov listened. And Yaakov, once he heard the tzivui, that's what made him go. So therefore, the pasuk is actually writing it to us in the way it happened. That's why I said before, it's out of order. It's not actually out of order, because in the events that it occurred, this is the order. First came the tzivui from Yitzchak, and then Vayishma Yaakov. Then Yaakov listened to the tzivui, and he went. And this is why this is why the pasuk says it the way it does. Aber benegeya Esavin, das was der pasuk lifi pinish Rashi will masber sein, die zwei Pratim in Anagas Esav, Kinal Siv Gimel Siv Dalid, gehört es zum zweiten Vayar Esav. But from Esav's perspective, the way the story plays out in Esav's mind, and then in Esav's actions, first he noticed that he went to Padan Aram, and that wasn't relevant to him. And then he realized that Yitzchak does not like the women of Canaan, and therefore he went to Yishmael. So therefore the order that Rashi brings it, though different than the pasuk, you should have known that from before, from the Vayitzav. But no, because first he was looking at the Padan Aram thing and saying that part is not relevant to me. And then he dealt with the Benois Knan, which was relevant to him. Therefore, what Rashi does is first he mentions the Halach Padan Aram, and then he mentions the fact that the Chiro is Benois Knan. Why B'chlal does Rashi have to bring all these details? Which was one of our questions. L'chaira, it would have been enough to tell us that Vayishma Yaakov belongs to the first Vayar, to Vayar Esav. Yitzchak gave the brachas. Yitzchak sent it to Padan Aram. Vayishma Yaakov listened. So we asked earlier in the Sikha, in the beginning of the Sikha, why B'chlal does Rashi have to mention all these details? Siv Zayin, leidem is echt verstandig, was Rashi bringt up, nicht nur die Pratim zu welchem Vayishma Yaakov ist gechuber, nur euch V'chishama Yaakov ben Esav welch Padan Aram, V'chiro is B'nois Knan. Why Rashi actually mentions the fact that Esav saw that Yaakov listened, and the fact that he went to Padan Aram, and the fact that Yitzchak was not fond of the daughters, the women of Canaan. Damit es Rashi uischen zu Masbe sein, für was Vayishma Yaakov ist mechuber bloß zu Kiberach v'chishilach und nicht mechuber zu Vayitzav. Rashi is here to explain to us why Taka am I saying to you that Vayishma Yaakov goes back to the first Vayar and not to the Vayitzav, which, as we said before, belongs to the second Vayar. Weil der Ort von dem Prat Vayitzav, welcher drückt uns durch sein Tam in die Werte V'chirois B'nois Knan, is late Esavin erst noch dem ganzen Seder von Vayishma Yaakov Vayelech Padan Aram. Es gehört zum Vayar, was bewirkt Alichas Esav zu Yishmael. Because Rashi wants to highlight this point, that Vayishma Yaakov belongs to before, and that the Vayitzav belongs to later. So therefore Rashi has to lay out the whole story, different than the way it's laid out in the pasuk, but in the way Esav processed it, in order for us to understand how it happened. So therefore, had Rashi not said anything, it would be very confusing. Why did Esav not recognize the fact that there is B'nois Knan in the first Vayar? If Vayitzav, which was the commandment to Yaakov, to not marry a woman from B'nois Knan, was part of the first Vayar, then why, the first seeing that Esav experienced, then why did he not understand it then? So therefore, Rashi tells it in this order to make sure that we understand how in Esav's mind it played itself out. That first there was a Vayar that told him about not going, he didn't have to go to Padan Aram. And then there was another Vayar that included the Vayitzav, that told him not to marry from Canaan, that was applicable to him as well, which led him to go to Yishmael. And therefore we asked our fourth question in the Sikha was, why does he mention the fact that he went to Yishmael? If that's not one of the things that Esav saw, it was one of the things that Esav did. Rashi wants to make it clear. As Vayitzav Goimar is late Nina to Reis B'nois Knan, Nita Ninivas is Mechuber to Vayishma Yaakov Gener Vayelech Padan Aram, to clarify once again that the fact that there was a Vayitzav, which Vayitzav was there because Reis B'nois Knan, not because he had to go to Padan Aram. So this is not connected to the Vayishma Yaakov, nor a Chelek von Satan Vayar, was the Bavik Esav Zalichet zu Yishmael. In other words, the Rashi has to add the words V'halachul al Yishmael because he wants to explain to you what the second Vayar did. The second Vayar actually caused the Vayelech al Yishmael. That was the kind of Vayar that it was. It was such a Vayar that it was a haven, that he understood what has to happen. So therefore Rashi adds in the V'halach gam hu al Yishmael to tell us that the second Vayar was the one that convinced him to go and marry a woman from Yishmael. Sivches. Das was Rashi lost is dem Vayitzav v'Gomer. Beim Ausrechnen de Pratim von zu welcher Yishmael Yaakov is mechuber. Now the Rebbe adds another thing. We asked the question. The second question was in the Sikha, why does Rashi omit the Vayitzav when he says the Yishmael Yaakov is mechuber? Linyan Shalmaila is connected to it's connected to the above. He says that what pshat is connected to the above. It's connected to the fact that Esav saw that Yitzchak benched Yaakov and he sent it to Padan Aram. So we asked the fact that he saw the Vayitzav, the commandment of Yitzchak to Yaakov, that was not mentioned in Rashi. We asked why. So we already answered this question earlier in the Sikha, and that is because since the Vayitzav is not Negeya until later, it's relevant to the second Vayar, it doesn't belong here in Rashi. In Sivches, the Rebbe makes another explanation. Das was Rashi lost is dem Vayitzav v'Gomer. Beim Ausrechnen de Pratim zu welcher Yishmael Yaakov is mechuber. The fact that Rashi omits the Vayitzav when listing the details to which Yishmael Yaakov is connected. He says, "Nit vleis mitzad dem was in dem Vayitzav hat Esav gesehen an inyan hat nit kein chibur to the andere Pratim, because when he saw the commandment, he didn't see any connection to the other details. Wie gesagt früher, as we said earlier in the Sikha, as dem Vayitzav v'Gomer hat gesehen wie an inyan was hat shayches eich zu ihm, that the Vayitzav was relevant to him, and the other details until Yishmael Yaakov was not relevant to him. Nor euch mitzad dem was Yishmael Yaakov hat in Esav's re'iyah kein chibur nit zum Vayitzav. Not only is the Vayitzav not connected to the details before, Vayitzav is also not connected to the Yishmael Yaakov. Leit Esav's Meinung is Yaakov mit sein Gehen kein Partner Rom, darf gewen auszufolgen Yitzchak Shliches, bechdei zu bekommen die Brachis, hat es aber nicht getan zu lieb dem Tzivur leisikach. This is another chiddush over here that we didn't touch upon. It says by Yishmael Yaakov. Yaakov listened to Yitzchak and he went to he went to Padan Aram. So the question becomes why? What was he listening to? So until now, we would think he listened to both things. He knew that his father wanted him to go to Padan Aram. He knew that his father does not like the daughters of Canaan. So he goes to Padan Aram. The Rebbe now explains to us that Esav's opinion was that the only motivation for Yaakov to go to Padan Aram was for the brachas, and not because of the tzivur leisikach. And this is another explanation why Rashi omits the tzivur of leisikach and the things that Esav saw, because as far as Esav was concerned, Yaakov's trip to Padan Aram had nothing to do with the tzivur. It was only connected to the first part, to the fact that in order to get his brachas, he needs to go to Padan Aram. And also this is connected to the fact that he went to Esav went to Yishmael, which Rashi also mentions. Rashi bringt den Sinn von sein Pirush, because of the following reason. Esav went against Yishmael. When Esav went to Yishmael, it wasn't just to marry a woman from Yishmael because his father didn't like the women of Canaan. There was more than that. Esav was intent on proving not only that he fulfills the will of Yitzchak, but also to make the point that he is no less than Yaakov. He is more fine. He's greater than Yaakov. Esav is doing something that Yitzchak wants, despite the fact that he was not commanded to do so. Whereas Yaakov went because he was told to do so. So Esav is even greater. So this V'halach Amol Yishmael is a conclusion not just to the fact that Esav did not like that Yitzchak did not like the women of Canaan, but it's also in a continuation to the fact that Yaakov did go to Yishmael. The Yaakov did go to Padan Aram because he had brachas to get. But Esav had no brachas to get. Esav was not commanded to go, and nevertheless he went. This allows Esav to prove himself that he's even better than Yaakov. And with this answers every detail of Rashi. I actually made a chart on this. It was the only way I can truly grasp it. It was a little bit difficult, but now that you see the whole flow of Rashi and how each prat of Rashi fits in like a puzzle, it is absolutely brilliant. Have a wonderful week.